You know what I'd rather do than just play pinball right now?
What?
I would rather we talk about it.
Sure. So you want to talk about virtual pinball.
I would love to.
What makes it virtual as opposed to actual pinball?
Yeah, I guess we can call that actual pinball. That is the best. And virtual pinball is an attempt to replicate that, to get it as close to the real thing as possible. It will never quite get there. However, having actual pinball tables in the home is cost prohibitive. Most people have none. Some people have one. You have a few people out there, very few, that might have like 8 or 10 and they take over several rooms in their house. But even then, I think they get bored of those tables and they switch them out. And just imagine moving a 300-pound pinball machine. Doing that once is not particularly fun. Doing that over and over again, it's really going to wear on you. So to me, virtual pinball is our attempt at getting as much of the enjoyment as possible, but at the same time removing all of the things that get in the way of actually doing such a thing.
Because if I want to play pinball, I probably have to find an arcade that has pinball or a bar, maybe.
Yeah.
So what you're trying to say is that let's take pinball tables and make it digital?
Yeah, and putting it in the home. I don't really see a digital table out there at an arcade or a bar. And there are places where they have that. There will be some bars that will be switching out their tables every now and then. And if you frequent that area, you can throw $1 in the machine for a 2-minute game of pinball, right? Or however much it costs now, or however good you are, so you can extend the game. But making it digital through a computer, it doesn't have to be a $5,000 computer, something that's relatively affordable. A computer, though, that is really dedicated to pinball. I suppose this is the kind of thing that you could do on your laptop that you normally use for everything. But usually we build a desktop, and we don't really have any of our programs on there except what you need for virtual pinball. And then, instead of just playing it on one screen, let's play it on more. Let's play it on 2 screens, maybe 3. Let's have one screen laying down the way the play field would look like on an actual pinball machine. And instead of hitting the shift keys or the enter key on your keyboard, let's kind of route those functions to buttons that are on the side of a cabinet that you build. Let's buy a plunger from some pinball manufacturing house. Let's take something that connects it from the analog to the digital realm, and let's see how close we can get with the real experience. How similar can we make it so it feels like the real thing?
So this is a step beyond just, hey, let's play a video game of pinball.
True. It is, in essence, a video game, but you've probably heard the term emulation before. That's really what it is. People have emulations of video games, and that's a really simple thing to do because a video game was digital already. Someone likes Donkey Kong that they played in 1982 in some arcade, and then they buy some, I think it's called MAME, it's an emulation thing, and it's practically the same thing. It's so similar. It feels exactly the same. But with pinball, I mean, heck, there was really no computers involved in pinball until 1976. It was just lots of relays and switches and actual mechanical parts. And it's an attempt to make it digital and even though it is a video game, try to make it where it doesn't quite feel like one, where it actually feels like it's a machine in between your hands.
Okay, so you're talking have a plunger and flippers and
that's right.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. You know, when you think about a pinball machine, you have that play field, and that's the thing that's laying down. And, you know, it's not completely flat because you want gravity to kind of push it down to the bottom where your flippers try to keep it afloat. And you're just trying to keep the ball going as long as you can, but you're also trying to hit certain areas and increase your score. And with more recent tables, it's almost like a mission-based thing. You know, let me go ahead and accomplish these goals, and then let me unlock things like multi-ball or something called a wizard mode, which you have to be really good at on any table to get to, but some people can. And it's all those things in one machine. And it's a machine that you build yourself. It's ones that you could buy. Some are legal, some are not quite. But if you build it yourself, it's pretty much going to be legal, and it's there's like a pride of ownership and of building. It's got this great DIY community approach to it.
I was going to say, I don't think you can just go buy a kit for this, can you?
Well, you can buy kits for the cabinet. There are sites, I think Virtua Pin is one that comes to mind, where they will have the wood that's already sized to the right specifications. And so as long as you have the nuts and bolts and all that, you can put it together. You can go to computer, the Radio Shacks of the world, or the one close to me is Micro Center, and that's where I went to build my, and it was a desktop, so it's in that tower. That's how I built mine. Get all that stuff together. Go ahead and download the programs, all of which are free. There is a bit of a learning curve to get it to work properly. And then there are certain little kits. Like, for instance, there's something, and I'll tell you more about it another time, but there's something where these solenoids actually fire. They make a click every time I hit the flipper, or every time that ball, and again, it's not a real ball. I mean, it's in essence a video game, but when it hits one of those targets or pop bumpers or stuff like that, and that gives you a sound, but it also gives you a feeling that you feel through your hands. There are individual kits for those. I've got something called a shaker motor, which actually shakes at certain right moments within the game. That didn't exist in real pinball until, I think, 1990 or so. But it does add something to it. So putting all the kits together yourself is it. Can you buy a ready-made one? You can. I think At Games, Arcade 1-Up, those are some companies that I have in mind. But honestly, they're not as good. They're getting better, but they're usually smaller. There's usually a huge bezel between like the side of the cabinet and the screen itself. And you also get what you pay for. So some of them might have a lower frame rate. And I feel like so much of this is trying to suspend the disbelief. If you got a low frame rate and it feels jarring, then it feels like a video game. How much can you put into it so it feels like actual pinball? But another thing is, how much does it need to feel like actual pinball to you? When I grew up, my first experience playing pinball was, I think it was called Raise the Devil. It was made by this company called Entex. And it was just this little handheld game. I mean, it was like the size of a book. And it was just a bunch of LED lights. But it represented pinball, and it gave me a thrill playing that. Think about on the Atari 2600, this cartridge called Video Pinball, and it's nothing at all like pinball in a sense. In fact, that game is really about nudging and moving the ball, a lot with nudging. But because it was still moving a ball with a couple of flippers and trying to keep it alive, I loved it. Probably played more Atari Video Pinball than any table that I have in the cabinet that you see.
What about recently? What did you play recently that got you here?
I think when I was like in junior high, my uncle bought a 1977 table called 8-Ball. This is the kind of thing that I know more about now because I've learned a lot more about pinball, the history of pinball, through my virtual pinball journey. I now know that there are only 2 tables, at least in recent times, where they made more than 20,000 of those tables. And 8-Ball in 1977 was one of them. It probably sold well because it really looked like Fonz from Happy Days. And again, this is 1977. It looked like Fonz and Pinky Tuscadero on the back glass. It really looked like them. I'm not sure it really was them, but it did. And it's an interesting game. It's got that pool theme. And it's funny how many pinball machines, and these are actual ones, always come back to pool or poker, maybe even darts, just like these other games. that people would play for entertainments. They kind of incorporated that into the themes. So I would play this 8-ball actual pinball machine every time I visited my uncle, my aunt, my cousins. And I know in his basement he had like a Space Invaders cocktail table. He had a jukebox. He had these really cool lights where the lights would change when the music would play. He had a shuffleboard bowling. He had a slot machine. He had all these toys. And it made it such like a fun place to be. But the one thing I always had to play was pinball. I love that game, that 8-ball game, and it kind of stands the test of time.
So how'd you get from there to virtual pinball?
Where I am now? Well, I do have some other video game systems, like just through the years. This happens if you're a Generation X guy, right? You buy a PS2 or you buy a Xbox 360, and maybe you're at GameStop looking for something cheap and fun to play. And there was a couple of pinball collections out there. One is a Gottlieb collection, one is a Williams collection, and I bought those. Actually, there was one on the Wii. It was a Williams collection. That was more impressive to me than the Gottlieb collection that I got. And there was a game on there called Whirlwind. It was the most recent one on there, and I really liked playing it. And my 5 or 6-year-old son at the time, I wanted to see if there was one he wanted to play. He actually liked the oldest one there. It was called Jive Time, and it's from the 60s, and it is really trippy and far out. But it has this spinner going on as like a bonus feature, and he really got into that. So I thought when COVID hit in 2019 or 2020, and I had some time on my hands and I was looking for a hobby, I thought, okay, maybe this is something I can do. I saw a couple of YouTube videos where people had already done this. They had not only incorporated the programs, but they had built cabinets. And it's funny, when a lot of people see this for the first time, they think that can't be real. How can you do that? But then you think about it enough, and of course it can. It's just the input. It's just that I'm hitting buttons on the side of the cabinet, and I'm hitting an actual plunger rather than just hitting the enter key on a keyboard. And when you think about it that way, it makes all the sense in the world that we can do it.
Okay, so I'm in. Let's do it.
Okay.
Where do you begin? Do you have to do all the programming first, or do you have to build a cabinet?
Well, I don't think it makes sense to build a cabinet before you start on the software portion of it. I'll admit I was worried about the software, that I wasn't going to be able to get it up and active. There is something through, it's called Pinup Popper, which is a front end. That's like the kind of program you use at the beginning to allow you to circulate through all the different tables. The one I use is called Pinball Y. Pinup Popper, they call it the baller installer. That's what they call it. And I think in basically one click of the mouse, it gives you all the programs you need. It wasn't as clear cut for me back in 2019 when I was putting it together. And I had a few hiccups, but I am not the best around computers, but I try to figure things through. And it took me a little while, but I figured out how to get tables running. At first, I just had a bunch of tables on a single screen play. Like, for those people who don't want to build a cabinet, you really could put this on your one and only machine and your one and only screen, as long as you have a pretty decent graphics card. And I don't mean like 120 frame per second Call of Duty, stuff like that. It doesn't have to be that great. But if you're able to get it to run, you can find something that is similar to, like a video game pinball that you would have come across. I started collecting tables, and it's like a certain number of files that you need for each table. And I really didn't build the cabinet until I had 500 tables in my collection. I felt like, okay, I'm committed enough here that now I got to build the darn thing.
So where do you get things like this, your virtual pinball programs? Do you have to buy that somewhere?
No. And there's a lot of discussion that one can have about buying versus sharing, because it really is a community, not an industry. Everybody shares this stuff for free. Now keep in mind, I've got 8-ball, the emulation, on my machine. That was made by Bally in 1977. They probably stopped making it within a few months of starting. After that, you still have the rights to it, but it's not like they're losing money by anybody making a free simulation or emulation of it. And I guess if they really wanted to, they could say, no, that's our copyright. We're keeping that for 70 years or however long. But fortunately, they don't do that. I think they realize that any interest in the pinball community is good interest. So if you find the files, and there's several different sites, VP Forums comes to mind, VP Universe. I've gone to forums more, but VP Universe seems like the big one. In fact, there's actually a really good spreadsheet out there on the internet, and I can share a link, provided this goes on YouTube. I'll share a link in the comments there below the screen of where to go. But that'll show you how to get like a VPX file. VPX stands for Virtual Pinball 10. That's like the most recent version of this Virtual Pinball. You need, in essence, a file for the back glass. You need a ROM, which is, in essence, the computer program that runs any table from like 1976 to the present day. And then little things like a picture of a wheel image. And my wheel images kind of go across the screen to kind of show you what it is. And then you might make another file or two on your own when you're sizing it up to have it look just right. Because there is some manipulation that you're going to want to do for each table. So I'm not going to lie, it takes a while to get things set up. We're talking in the year 2026, and I will still come across a table that I've had for 5 years, and I think that doesn't quite look right. Let me resize it. But it's almost part of the fun. I think virtual pinball aficionados get into making their collection better and their experience better, and they love to share it if possible.
Do I have this right that if you remember playing an actual pinball table,
yeah,
in an arcade kind of table,
yeah,
you can possibly go out and find that table in a digital form?
Most likely, yes. So 8-Ball was out there, right? And that's like a table that's almost 40 years old. Not everything is out there, though, but Bally's first table was called Ballyhoo. I think it was based off a magazine at the time. They just named it that. And then it was this Ballyhoo table they had. And by the way, it was really pinball in the form of a bunch of pins and a ball bouncing off it, and you kind of have to keep your own score. This is like a game that came out in 1932, like in the middle of the Great Depression. That's out there in the virtual pinball realm. So, yes, I have that on my machine. And I'm not saying everybody remembers playing good old Ballyhoo back 90 years ago or whatnot, but yeah, there are tables from all eras. 70s tables, 50s tables, 90s tables when they first brought the dot matrix display where they could give you more detailed instructions. And I'm not going to tell you there's a table that just came out a month ago that you're going to find here. The community does not do that. Can you imagine why?
Well, let's see. If it's a brand new table,
yeah,
I am not going to play the brand new table. I would go download it and play it in my basement.
And that's going to hurt the manufacturer, right?
Right. So, but the manufacturers seem to be okay with old tables being out there and being digitized?
It depends on the manufacturer. There's one that was located out of New Jersey that is around now. They're not okay with it. They make tables. They started making them maybe around 2011 or so, and I think they have said, no way, no how. Do not put any of our stuff out there. So I make sure that I don't have those on my machine now. You know, once you learn that stuff, you want to make sure that you're on the up and up. But Stern, which we haven't mentioned before, but they kind of started in the 70s, went away, and then the Sun started in the 90s. And like in 2001, he was the only game in town. And that's still the biggest name, Stern Pinball. Well, they produce pinball machines now. Their newest one is Pokemon. And you're not going to find an emulation of that Pokemon table out there for VPX. If someone's already working on it, you're not going to find one of these public sites like VP Forums sharing it because they don't want to undermine what goodness they've got going, what understanding that this community has with the manufacturers. But one that came out in 2012, or let's say Stern hasn't produced the table in a few years, yeah, they're going to be okay with that.
So there's a code of honor among the virtual pinball community.
Yeah.
Not to blow it.
Yeah. That's,
Okay.
that's a good way about it. And I'm not saying it never possibly gets blown. There was a site, I think 6 years ago, where they were intentionally grouping up the files that were made for VP Forums and VP Universe. They were taking their own versions. They were bundling them together, and I think they were toying with the idea of charging people to do that. It wasn't a site located in America. It was a completely different continent. But the community raised up, tried to make sure that they were not successful. In fact, if you look in these files, often there's scripts within that if you know what you're doing, you can look in the script and figure out. And they'll say, if you found this anywhere other than VP Forums or VP Universe, don't use it. You know, if you paid money to get this file, you got ripped off, don't use it.
Let's talk how much this is going to cost.
That makes sense. Okay.
Because that's, bottom line, what's this going to cost?
Right. Well, it's not free. And I'll tell you some numbers. I'll tell you how much I spent. But I want you to keep in mind that a new table is somewhere in the area of $7,000 to $12,000.
A new actual pinball table.
That's right.
Arcade version.
Right. And I don't mean a virtual one. Although there are companies out there that sell with all these bells and whistles on them, and those can get upwards of $6,000 to $8,000. So, yeah, you can spend a lot of money to get a virtual pinball table, just as you can spend a lot of money to get a single actual pinball table. But the one I created, now keep in mind, this is like 2020.
And you built this yourself.
I did. I'd say the computer cost about $1,200. The monitors, and I've got two of them. The back glass monitor, the one that's laying down, it's like a 42-inch monitor that costs like $300.
Wait, the back glass monitor is the one laying down?
Oh, actually, the back glass is the one standing up.
Okay.
You're right. I'm glad you said that. The playfield is the one laying down. Good. And that one cost $300. The back glass monitor, for me, it was actually a TV I was ready to get rid of anyway. It was the one that was in our family room, and we wanted to upgrade and get one that was a little bit bigger. And, you know, plasma is kind of, they don't even use that anymore, right? When people buy TVs, they don't buy plasma. As it turns out, plasma makes a lot of sense for a pinball, especially when it comes to DMDs. Because I think a DMD, in essence, is plasma. So I did an upgrade. But if I wanted to buy that, it probably cost $100 because I would have bought it used. The cabinet that I made, and I actually made it. Most people build their own cabinets, and they try to make it look as much like an actual pinball machine as possible. You know, I got to buy the pinball legs, or maybe I'll just buy an old pinball machine and like gut it and use that. I didn't see anything out there like that, so I designed my own, and mine's different. Mine actually extends further down. You know how people, like, when they buy a pinball machine, there's all that space below, and they just put all these boxes of storage there? It's like a waste. So why not just make it longer anyway? And I do it that way because then I have more space for my computer. If I'm having problems with my computer, I can just go ahead and pull it out because it's in a tower, and I can take it to a technician and have him work on it. But yeah, I built it basically with an IKEA bookshelf, like a bookshelf. Now, if you know anything about IKEA, it's not the strongest stuff in the world. But it worked well enough on the outside. And then the inside, I grabbed 4x4s. And I grabbed joints and wheels from Harbor Freight. And I didn't do plywood. I did medium density fiberboard. Maybe if I did it all over again, I'd do the plywood that you would normally see in a pinball cabinet. Yeah, and I just put it all together. I did it with my kid at the time. I designed it so it had a certain width to perfectly fit my my monitor for the playfield, that one that's laying down. And it's kind of like threw it together that way. And it probably weighs, I'll tell you, it's heavy. It probably weighs as much as an actual pinball machine. But again, mine has wheels. I can move it by myself. Good luck doing that with any new pinball machine. And then also, I bought the those solenoids, and that cost about $350 at the time.
Wait, before we go on, what is a solenoid?
Oh, very good. Okay. Well, it is one of those, I think they're used in cars, actually, but it's probably a little more than the size of a golf ball, and when it gets electricity going to it, it just makes like a clunk sound. And there's a feeling to it. And since I've got that, and I bought this like collection of 8 of them where it's powered up, the feel will happen within the cabinet. So it's an extra sound and it's a feel just like you would have if you're playing a pinball machine and you were to hit a flipper. You know, there's a tactile feeling. So I wanted to add that. Other people just have a more fancy speaker system called surround sound feedback. So I could have gone that route, but I didn't. And I bought this shaker motor, which everybody who has a cell phone has when you put it on vibrate. It really is a little tiny motor that shakes around that's kind of off-center from an axle. So I just have a bigger version of that that'll sometimes fire when I'm playing certain tables. For $60, there was a local glass company that made the right size glass for me. I spent $60 for a lifetime subscription to one of those sites. I even went to a bookstore and found the Atari Video Pinball cartridge for $4 because I wanted it as a topper. Now I can't plug that in anywhere. In fact, I don't have Atari Video Pinball recreated on this. Honestly, I'd probably play for about 1 minute if I did, but if it was out there, I would have it. And I just think it looks really good because it's like, you know, you're trying to make it your own, right? Well, I got a video pinball cartridge on the top because that's kind of introduced me to the entire thing.
Okay, so you add all that up.
Yeah.
How much did it cost?
So it cost me
to
about...
build it yourself.
Yep, got it. And again, I only had to buy one screen. But if you include the new TV that I bought to replace it, which I was going to do anyway, it was about $3,000. So again, $3,000 can feel like a lot. This has been my main hobby for over 5 years. That's not a lot of money to spend for any amount of time, especially for 5 years. And especially when I have almost 1,000 tables that I can play. And again, for anybody that likes pinball... And I do own an actual pinball machine. My parents gave it to me. It would cost about $3,000 now if I were to buy it out there in the open market. It's a table from the 80s. But that's one game. So if you think of quantity and quality, if you're a quantity guy, and I am, virtual pinball is definitely the way to go.
So you said that you made this cabinet yourself.
Right.
And you kind of made it according to what you wanted it to be.
That's true.
What else did you do to make it different than anybody else's?
Well, yeah, because I pointed out that it's kind of longer, right? In fact, someone who saw it said it looks like it's got a long skirt. And I said, yeah, for the elegant night on the town.
Yeah.
It's got that look. One thing I did when I was putting it together before I had the cabinet was I wanted to see my monitor better, so I put it up at a higher angle. I think pinball machines are typically about 5 or 6 degrees above horizontal, so that the ball slowly rolls down to the flippers. If you made it higher, it would roll too quickly. And that's in the real version. But really, virtually, you don't have to have it laying down at all. You could have it up against the wall and playing it that way. And I've actually seen it that way because the gravity isn't really controlled by actual gravity. It's controlled by the program itself. So I have mine at a more severe angle. It's about 20 degrees. I feel like that helps me see the whole table a little bit better. Makes the cabinet a little bit smaller, but still gives me the right feeling. My back glass, I actually have a full screen TV that is sitting the way a TV normally would. That would be landscape instead of portrait. And that probably doesn't add an awful lot, although I have some video pinball graphics on the sides. But what it does help me do is other non-pinball things. So one of those MAME cabinets that plays video games, well, if I have one of those, I can plug it right into that TV and play. I still have my Wii. I still have my Xbox 360. And that thing, that back glass, it's still an actual TV. I was watching a World Cup game down here the night before. So I've really got a multimedia entertainment experience here, and pinball is only one part of it. It is my favorite part, but that's another thing that makes it different.
You said that you use VPX.
Yeah, that's right. Virtual Pinball 10.
Okay, so is that the best one? Is that the only one?
It's not the only one. In fact, there are a few, we'll call them actual tables out there that have not been emulated in VPX yet. Maybe VP9 is the most recent one. But if there's a VPX table, almost every time you get it. There's something called P-Rock, and there was a few tables that I would need P-Rock for. And I will admit, I haven't really been successful getting that to work. And I'd say the other one that really stands out is Future Pinball, FP. That actually came out before the VP8, VP9, VP10s of the world, created by a man named Chris Leithley, who I think was out of Australia. I don't think he's involved with it anymore. And that feels different. To me, it's a different experience, and it really feels more like a video game. That doesn't mean it's a bad experience. I feel like the tables on Future Pinball are actually prettier, if that's possible. I think it's got something called sway in there where it intentionally moves the perspective around just a little bit. Just like the way if you're a human and you're swaying back and forth, and it might kind of add to the 3D experience, Future Pinball has that. But I've got a few FP tables, and I can't get the plunger to work, and I can't get my solenoids to fire, and it takes longer for it to load, and sometimes it freezes up my computer. Now, I'm not blaming Future Pinball for that. That's me. I just can't get it to work that well. But there are some really old tables before flippers. Humpty Dumpty came out in 1947, and that was the first table to use electromechanical flippers to sort of allow you to move the ball up to the top and make it more a game of skill and less a game of chance. This is a big deal in the history of pinball, and there's a lot more of those tables in Future Pinball. So I might need to get on the stick and figure out how to get Future Pinball to work more. But for anybody who's starting, VPX is a good first place to start and possibly the only place you need to be.
What about this program that rotates between tables?
Yeah, that's called a front end. So I use Pinball Y, but Pinup Popper is out there as well. And there's a Pinball X, there's a Hyperpin, there's a Pinball Emporium. I mean, people might just design their own front ends, and you really don't need a front end. If you just want to open up your Windows file and just double click on that table and it will open, you can do that. But what's nice about the front end is it just kind of looks prettier, and it's got this better presentation of it. So I enjoy Pinball Y. The man who created his name, Mike Roberts, and he came up with a guide that's out there on his website that told me more than anywhere else on what virtual pinball does and how you can build it. So whatever I'm telling you now, it really can't hold a candle to the guide that he created. And again, I didn't have to buy it at a bookstore for $30. It's on his website for free. Just the whole community. It's like, all right, we're creating a version of something that was made for profit, and we're sharing it all for free, and they're okay with it. And we're making sure that no one's going to take this and then try to make money off it because it's not theirs to sell.
The people who create the files are volunteers?
Yep, they all do it on their own. That's right. And they're all around the world. Maybe the most well-known one is this retired engineer of Spanish descent who lives in Norway. And everybody loves him. His name is J.P. Salas. He's able to create these wonderful tables, both actuals and originals, and his files are incredibly small. I guess the size of the file doesn't mean too much if you've got a real souped-up computer, but mine's not very future-proof anymore. And if there's a file that's 300 megabytes and then there's a file that's 25 megabytes and I can't tell the difference, I'll take the 25 megabyte file. It gives me more room from other tables as well. But yeah, JP Salas, he doesn't make any money on it. He does it for free. It's a labor of love. These people share it on sites, and anybody can get a copy. I will tell you, though, I never understand why people don't thank them. When you grab the site, there's all these comments, and it is not uncommon to see a file that's been downloaded 2,000 times, and maybe there's 5 thank yous, and that's it. Can you imagine in the actual realm. Imagine you're walking down the street and someone created some version of artwork and they just gave it to you. My gosh, wouldn't you at least say thank you if they just gave it to you for free? I just don't understand why the community doesn't necessarily thank each other. So there's still a lot of, users out there, free riders, and that's actually okay as long as they're not taking it and then selling it elsewhere. Can't ever have that. The whole community will not last long if that keeps happening. It gets shut down right away. But if that becomes more of a problem, this community could perish.
Let's say I want to create a table. How many files do I need for each table?
For each table? Well, 2. You wouldn't need a ROM for that. If you're creating your own, you're in essence going to need one for the back glass and one for the playfield. And those 2 files have to have the same name, and that's like before the .vpx or the .b2s or whatnot. And as long as they're synced up, that's really all you need. Other stuff that I have kind of just help it have the right perspective. And the perspective I'm looking for is I stand at my table. It's Fire from Williams, 1987. And when I stand there and I look down at the flippers, they look a certain way. And when I look up at the top of the playfield and I'm looking at, I don't have pop bumpers on Fire, but I'm just looking at the angles of drop targets. How does that look? And I just try to recreate that when I go into the diagnostics, as it were. I hit F12 when I'm in the table itself, and I line things up with a inclination and a field of view and layback. And these are things where you do it a handful of times. You just get used to doing the same thing over and over, and you look at it. And that, in essence, is a file in itself. And then I will make some media captures so that my front end has this nice attract mode. In fact, what you're seeing here, and I'm going to make sure it's working this way, is I'm showing every table that I have, and it's sitting there for about 5 seconds. Some of those tables, it's just a picture. But if the table itself had an attract mode, meaning when no one's playing it, some lights are going off to try to attract someone to drop their dime or their quarter in, I will film a video for that so that I can replicate it as much as possible. I will say that if someone goes out to create it, that's a daunting task. And I've only started to dip my toes in that water, because it sounds like there's a real learning curve on that. But again, the community will help you out. VPin Workshop has a YouTube presence where they talk about how you can actually start building tables on your own. And, I've been in this community for 5 or 6 years, and only now am I thinking about building those things. But it's a fun thought. How do I add to the community? What can I give away? What can I create that's my own?
So is it just plug and play, or do you have to tweak things?
Well, you do have to tweak. Like I said, you have to sort of change the dimensions of some things. And it will be sometimes you don't have the right ROM, or there's a file within the ROM that is missing, or, gosh, I don't know why this isn't playing. Let me go ahead and ask the community, can they help me out? But there are times where you plug it in and it works. You just take those 2 files, and actually most of the time it really does. But I do feel like when you've got, the more tables you have, and I have 994 tables at the moment. Honestly, there's a chance that a handful of these are not working right now. I mean, I'm not playing all 994 every day. There's only so many hours in the day. But I want to make sure that every file I have is one that is there for a purpose, that it has some historical significance, that maybe it's just a really good original table that I'm impressed with, or it was one that was produced to a certain number of units, and it has its own distinctive playfield. And I don't necessarily mean the art. I mean the way it's designed. Where are the flippers? If there are ramps, how many bumpers are there? How many in lanes and out lanes? Just the overall flow of the table. I don't necessarily feel like I have to have multiple tables with the same playfield. Unless it's got different artwork or a different feel, one should be enough. But still, I got 994 of them.
Is every table optimized for every cabinet?
No, it doesn't come that way. I do feel, I mentioned JP Salas before. For some reason, his layback is 76 degrees. That looks funny on my table. So when I go in there, I got to change it to 49. Why 49? Because to me, 49 looks right. If I change my inclination to 5, I subtract 5 from my layback. My field of view is always 29. My table X scale is 100 and my Y scale is, well, nowadays it's 102, which means that I have it about 2% wider than it would normally be. And as a side note, the monitor I have doesn't have the same aspect ratio, think like width to height or whatever, however you want to talk about it, as an actual pinball table. In fact, there's no monitor that does, unless they're curved. Those curved monitors, that would not work for this at all. So there's really no perfect monitor. So if you want it to look just right, you're going to have some dead space on the left and the right-hand side. And I kind of try to minimize that, but still have it feel like it's correct.
Okay, for the tables themselves, the actual games.
Yeah.
You mentioned that this community is around the world. Can I get tables from around the world?
For sure. Most of what I have is from America, but I do have a lot of tables from Spain, some from Brazil. Hankin was out of Australia. Raleigh was out of France. Zaccaria was out of Italy. There's probably some other countries I'm forgetting. But yeah, there are tables from all around the world. Nowadays, I think there's one out of Wales, but that's a fairly new table, so I don't think you're going to find that in the virtual realm yet. But if you want to play tables from all around the world, yeah, they're absolutely out there. The American companies, and by the way, all of them come from Chicago. Even that one that was out of New Jersey is now in Chicago. And I mean the suburbs of. But Gottlieb is from Chicago. That was like the first big pinball company. They lasted until about 1996 or so. Bally, Williams, Stern. There's other ones like Data East. Sega was in it. Game Plan. I could go on and on. But all those companies really had their headquarters in the Chicagoland area.
What about different eras, different years of pinball?
Yeah, I don't think you saw anything in the Roaring 20s. And now we're talking about 100 years ago, right? But I think, and actually that's funny. From my understanding, historically, the first mass-produced pinball game was called Baffle Ball. And it was made by Gottlieb. In fact, they hired other companies to make them. That's how Bally started with Ballyhoo. Believe it or not, I don't have Baffle Ball. No one's created it. At least not in VPX, not in Future Pinball. I know Microsoft many years ago had some like pinball entertainment pack you could buy that had Baffle Ball. Man, I wish someone would recreate Baffle Ball. Maybe that's the kind of thing that I need to learn how to do. I don't know why it's challenging, but maybe it just hasn't been done. So there are really so many different eras. We didn't, like I said before, solid states with the computer chip didn't come in until the mid-'70s. Flippers weren't invented until 1947. But I have 50 tables from 1978. 50. So early solid state still plays about the same as the later electromechanicals. And why don't I have 50 from this year, or why don't I have 50 from 2004? Because there just weren't that many pinball machines being created. There's a real ebb and flow of the popularity of pinball. Not only how popular it is and how many machines were created, but just how good those machines were. In the 1990s, there was a golden era of pinball where those early 90s tables, all of them were fantastic. And they were expensive, but people held on to them. They had this great replay value and resale value. I mean, you want to buy a table from 1993 now, and maybe it was a table that cost $6,000 then. It might cost you $10,000 now. It actually would have been a good investment to just buy it and sock it away somewhere, like stock. But this is stock you get to play, so it's good fun. But you know what? I don't have just pinball. I don't have like a slot machine emulation, but I know some people have that. I do have some games that kind of emulate baseball. They're called pitch and bat games because those were popular, and those were actually made by the pinball companies. I have a couple of bowling games. There's some... Oh, in fact, in the early 80s, I think they were called Hyperball and Rapid Fire. And this was them trying to compete with the early video games like the Pac-Man and Donkey Kong sort of Space Invaders games, where it shot smaller pinballs and they just kept firing like 5 a second. And you're going after these targets. I think Williams thought they were going to make 50,000 Hyperballs, and they were 1,000% too high on that. I'm not sure why they thought 50,000 different places would buy it, but they barely made 5,000, and those things kept on breaking. That was not what pinball was intended to do, but you can see they were trying to survive. And the history of pinball is all about that. How are we going to survive? You know, if there's a golden era, it doesn't last long. And they went from all these different companies to one when we got to the year 2000. But now suddenly you have a lot of upstarts that are out there, and like Jersey Jack Pinball has a lot of popular tables, and American Pinball is out there, and Stern is still running strong. So I guess you could say pinball is having a resurgence now, and with it, virtual pinball has as well.
Is every actual table unlike any other before it?
No. They're supposed to be different. The artwork will be a little bit different. But, you know, it's funny you say that because my number that I have will often go down. Like I had 1,060 tables at one point. I started slimming down. Here's an example. There was a game called Sheriff. And that was a 4-player game from Gottlieb that came out in 1971. Well, that same year, Gottlieb made a 2-player version of the same game. They called it Lawman. So kind of a similar theme, but a little bit different artwork. 2 players instead of 4, went to a different market. But if you were to look at the playfield without the artwork, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. There was a single-player version that went to Italy called Texas Ranger that came out the next year. Really the same thing. There was a Spanish company called Maresa. They came out with something called Dakota. Same thing. In fact, Gottlieb in 1975 rethemed the entire thing, made a couple of small changes, and called it Atlantis. So on my cabinet here, I only have Atlantis. I thought about keeping Sheriff, but I actually enjoyed the Atlantis experience, and it's practically the same playfield as Sheriff, let alone Texas Ranger and those other ones. So it would... You know, if you don't know what you're doing and you're just collecting everything, you end up with a lot of like multiple copies that are really only different by the name and a little bit of artwork. It actually takes some understanding of the history of it, looking at the Internet Pinball Database, ipdb.org, to figure out what really belongs in your collection and what you can get rid of.
How do you decide what to get rid of?
Well, usually I keep the first one that came out. I often like 1-player games over 2 or 4-player games.
The first one that came out...
That was actually created.
In the real world.
Yeah, in the real world.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point, because it doesn't necessarily go that way. No, I look at the history like, oh, this is a 1971 table. And yeah, you're right, it's an emulation that was maybe done in 2018 or 2023. But no, when it actually came out. And I do find myself using the term actual a lot. Yeah. But... I'll usually go with the first one unless there was a better improvement on one later, or one was more popular. The number of units produced were larger. And I do it on a case-by-case basis. But also, I'm not playing the actual table. I'm playing an emulation. So if the emulation for Sheriff was a lot better than the emulation for Atlantis, then yeah, maybe I would have kept Sheriff.
Are there tables that will never be made into virtual pinball?
I think so. There was a table made by this really creative guy, an unusual man named Python Angelo. If your name is Python, you know you're an unusual guy. And he came over as an artist, but he also was a designer as well. And he came up with a game called the Pinball Circus. It is really a 3D version. There's so many different layers to it, where you actually have a 3-dimensional, like say an elephant, and if you get the ball to a certain area, it rolls down his trunk and it goes into this area. I'm not sure how you could recreate that well in the virtual realm. J.P. Salas has his own version called Gargamel's Park. It's got this like Papa Smurf theme that he attaches. And so... yeah, I guess that's fun. I find myself more to the 2D versions, though. I mentioned Jersey Jack before. They don't want their stuff being recreated, but it's out there. I just don't feel good having it. Apart from that, I'm not sure there are any pinball machines that couldn't be recreated well enough to allow you to suspend the disbelief that you're not playing the real thing.
Which one did you get first?
You mean of all the tables I have?
Right.
Gosh, it's a good question. I think it was called Capersville, and that was because VP Forums suggested I try that first. That's got an interesting rule set. It's got this really cool, like, I don't know, noir feeling to it, and I think it came out in 1962 or sometime around then. But it still doesn't have all the gadgets that more recent pinball machines do. And I can't imagine anybody building this and then only keeping a couple of tables. The fewest I've seen out there for people who DIY it is probably like several hundred tables. And there are people that have more than me that are into 4 digits into what they have. But Capersville is the first one I remember. And anybody that's building this on their own, I think it makes sense to start with memories of tables. So 8-Ball, I know I got that one early. Fire, I got that one early just to compare it to see what I have on my actual table. There's a game called Hot Doggin' that when I was researching stuff, it just rung a bell to me, like maybe a friend of the family had it. So I got Hot Doggin' pretty early. Doesn't mean it's a great table. I mean, some people like it. But I got that one early. And then I wanted to see tables that are highly rated, because some are more rated than others, or more highly rated. In fact, do you remember what you told me when I told you I wanted to build this machine?
No, I don't.
You said, as long as you get Twilight Zone. That's what you said. So I made sure I got Twilight Zone pretty early, and I was thrilled to show it to you. And that was, when I only had a few tables, and we were just playing it off a keyboard, and that one thing laying down on the old dining room table that I had in the basement, or in a room in the basement, just to get that experience. And now it's more like the real thing. But it will never be exactly like the real thing. Maybe like 10 years ago, I got the chance to play an actual Twilight Zone table at a local arcade. It's the kind where you give them $20 and you can play all day. And that was better. I don't think anybody's going to deny that. Actual is better than virtual. But it's not just about that. It's, do you want one actual or, several hundred virtuals where you've built it yourself and you can keep approximating better and better and really never get bored of it? No matter how amazing Twilight Zone is, I'd imagine most people, if that was the only pinball machine they played, even if it became incredibly good, they're maybe so good again in the wizard mode that it doesn't really hold that much excitement for them anymore. So I don't have to worry about that with virtual.
Let me ask you some choices you have to make, and which is the one you feel is worth it?
Okay.
SSF versus DOF.
Yeah, that's right. DOF is direct output feedback. SSF is surround sound feedback. So people will get, in essence, a bunch of speakers. I swear they call them exciters. I'm not an audiophile, but I think the idea is the sound and the waves vibrating the cabinet. And that can make the actual, well, not actual ball, I should be careful, but the pinball, that little chrome thing that's about an inch in diameter, I think it's 1 1/16, by the way, inches in diameter. You can actually feel it and hear it moving around the cabinet. And you might not even realize when you play an actual pinball table that it does that, but it would be something to add to an experience. And I think SSF can do that in a way DOF cannot. My DOF is that shaker motor, and it's those solenoids. I think a few years back, DOF was the way to go. I'm thinking differently about that now because I've blown several solenoids, and they're like $10 to $15 each, but I have to go ahead and replace them every time. Each of them can only trigger, maybe 10,000 times or whatnot, and you would be, maybe it's 20,000, I don't know, but you'd be surprised how many times it triggers. You play pinball for 2 hours, you maybe set that thing off several thousand times. I get the feeling I'm off on the numbers there. They last longer than that, but over the 4 or 5 years I've had my DOF, I've had to replace like 3 or 4 solenoids, and I would prefer not to replace them at all. So I think if I was to do it all over again, I would look at surround sound feedback. So that's something I would have fixed. I have a 2-screen setup, and a lot of people create 3 screens, and that third screen would be just the dot matrix display. Now, if you don't know what a dot matrix display is, you can imagine a bunch of dots, and it's usually on the bottom below the artwork on the back glass. Sometimes in color, sometimes not. Usually between where the speakers would be. If you see something that looks like speakers on mine, it's just the artwork there because, that is a plasma TV. The sound isn't coming through the screen. It's coming from the speakers in the back of the screen. So I actually make my dot matrix display bigger. I make it about as wide as the back glass itself. It's easier for me to read. That's probably something that's distinctive with what I have as well. I really like that about my machine. It's easy to read, and I enjoy looking at the dot matrix display. So for me, a 2-screen setup makes all the sense in the world. I'm not going to bother with a 3rd screen. I've seen 4-screen setup where people have another screen above the back glass just to show what topper it would be. It'd be like a static thing. I'd say that's overboard. I wouldn't go that route.
So LEDs, yes or no?
No. Man, I don't get it. That seems so show-offy, for want of a better term. That would distract me from playing from the game. In fact, a bunch of really bright LEDs when you're trying to look at a fairly dark corner of the playfield, that's actually going to get in your way and you're not going to see it. I don't get the thing with LEDs. I really don't. I don't know why people even bother with that at all. Well, you know what? Speaking of that, though, remember I was talking about pinup popper?
Yeah.
There's something called a pup pack. And you've seen this before. It's video that will show on the back glass. And newer machines like the Sterns of the world, where the DMD used to be, they'll have some videos in there as well. And it just looks like an actual, TV, right? So the community loves pup packs. I think when they create their own themes, Jaws comes to mind. Really anything that's based on a movie or a TV show, someone will take clips of that. Probably a copyright infringement if I think about it, and they'll put it there. And long story short, I don't really bother with them because they distract from my play of the game, and I just don't feel like it adds that much to it. Or maybe I haven't found a theme that's that important to me where I want to see the video while I'm playing a pinball machine. It's cool that it does it, but I could take it or leave it, to be honest.
Okay, how about monitor clarity versus frame rate?
Oh, that's a good point, because I think everybody buys what's known as a 4K monitor now. But when I built this thing, you didn't have that. You'd have like 1080s and stuff like that, if that number rings a bell. 360, 720, 1080i, all this, and I got like 4K, which is maybe 18 something. My monitor is a 4K, but the frame rate is like 60 frames a second. Now compare that to the TVs that I watched as a kid, where it got like 30 frames a second. I think the Atari 2600, back in the day could do 60 frames a second, and I think maybe TVs could do 60. It's just the shows you would watch would only show 30 frames a second or 24 frames a second. You want like a smooth motion feel to it. So 30, I don't think would be enough. Nowadays, people think 60 isn't enough. Everybody's buying at least 120 megahertz, or hertz, I should say, or 144. The hertz and the frame rate are kind of equal in this case. I'm still rocking 60. I'm not going to upgrade that because I'm pretty sure I would need a stronger computer, more powerful computer to handle a frame rate that's higher. So that's stuff that you have to worry about. There's a trade-off. If you really want a super clear screen and a really high frame rate, you're going to have to pay the price on making sure that you've got like a top-of-the-line computer. If that's worth it to you, go ahead. To me, 60 frames a second is enough. I do think it's important that you get a monitor size that is pretty darn similar in size to the actual playfield. I know I talked before that the aspect ratio will never be quite right, but a 43-inch screen is about as close as you can get. Some people get 49-inch screens, and that's kind of similar to a wide-body table, and there are wide bodies. Twilight Zone's a wide body. Those Super Pin series that Bally Williams did in the early 90s are most Atari tables, and yes, Atari made actual pinball tables like Superman, and honestly, most of them were not good. But they were wider. And there's some wide body tables out there, but if you're not playing a wide body and you have a 49-inch screen, you're going to have a lot of dead space in the middle, and it's going to, like I said, you're not going to be able to suspend your disbelief. You want to look and feel as much like the real thing as possible, so to me, 43-inch around there makes sense. You could do a smaller one as well. I suppose you could. And but just to me, like, I think I want it to be about the same size as an actual pinball machine. If I have the room in my basement or wherever to fit it, that's what I'm going to want.
Xbox Connect.
You know about the Xbox Connect? Do you remember the Connect? I think it's by Xbox. It was, and I don't think it worked very well, but it was like it was a camera that filmed you, and a lot of people were worried about like privacy issues. And the idea is your body would be the controller, right? Does this ring a bell?
Yeah.
So people have incorporated that, and I thought it was just Future Pinball, but I guess it's also available on VPX, where it will watch your body, make a guess as to where your head is, and then, remember I was talking about sway before, where it will kind of add like a sort of pseudo third dimension. It will sense, oh, okay, if you're leaning over this way, then we should show a little more of this bumper. And it does that sort of stuff. Honestly, it's the kind of thing that looks fantastic when you're watching someone do it on YouTube. I just don't know how it plays out in real life. I think there may be a bit of a blur to it, although, other people might say otherwise just because we have two eyes and it can only focus on one image. But regardless of that, is it worth it? I actually tried to rebuild my cabinet to have a little bit extra space to put in a Connect. I was going to give it a shot, and then I realized I need to upgrade my computer to do it. I think it would be a little bit fun, but I don't think the juice would be worth the squeeze on it. But, going back to this, you're bringing up all these things like trade-offs and how to make it feel more real. If you want something that is fake that feels as real as possible, some people will tell you, forget the cabinet. Just put on VR goggles. Because you are able to run some of these programs through VR, these virtual reality goggles, which really sells the 3D. I know, our son has those goggles, and he's got a couple of those games. And for me, they're great fun for about 10 minutes, and then I got to put him down because I got a headache looking through those goggles. Younger eyes can handle it more, I'm sure, but I can't. So I can't really even handle the whole goggles idea. But for some people, that might be the way to go. And get this, people actually build really small cabinets. They're not deep, and they call them stubbies. It's basically some that's like a small cocktail table, and it just kind of stands there, and it's probably got the guts to, maybe the computer, and it's got the buttons, but it's a stubby. I don't know. I don't want anybody to come down and see me holding a stubby with these goggles, facing somewhere else, wrecking my eyes. That, to me, is not the experience I want. I want other people to come down and play it, too. I want, how do you even do a two-player game on that, That's just not for me. But, the whole 3D, 2D thing, what's believable? What really is this? I did another video where I show a painting by Rene Magritte. He didn't want to be called a surrealist painter, but he was. And he did one in 1929 called The Treachery of Images. And he paints a pipe, and underneath he says, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe," which means this is not a pipe. I feel that way about this. "Ceci n'est pas un flipper." Unflipper is French for pinball. That's what at least it said when I looked it up online. Well, that was as a young man. He actually then, as an older man, maybe a year before his death, he painted that painting and then had another pipe on the outside. He's playing around with levels of reality. That one's called The Two Mysteries. He kept coming back to this thing. We think of Magritte as the bowler hat and the apple in front, but he also worked the pipe in there a lot. And anybody watching the videos I have, and there's so many other good videos, like on YouTube, so many different channels, people showing how to build these things better than anything I could do. people who review like the best tables in the month, and I'm impressed with all that, and I love watching that stuff. But you look at it and you're seeing a 2D representation of a 2D representation of an actual machine. Which means when you go see a virtual pinball machine in person, right before you get there, you might be thinking it's going to be 3D, and it's not. It's still awesome, but it can be a little disappointing. And so I really urge people to, if possible, play one before they buy or build. I do wish that the Micro Centers of the world had something set up in such a way. Or, what you could do is, again, there's those like arcade one-ups and at-games or whatnot. You can buy those for a few $100s. Try one of those, and if you really enjoy that, think of that as like a stair-step approach. I would still want to build my own, but that would give you like the first indication of what it really feels like to actually play one of these things and see if it's the right thing for you.
So the community, sometimes they will make original tables or
Right.
a reskin of a table. Talk about the difference.
Yeah, reskin. I guess the idea is, imagine it's a different animal, or it's the same animal but a different skin. The idea is to make it look different, but it still plays the same. And I mean, that's actually been done, in the actual realm. There were conversion kits, they were called, that were sold by the manufacturers, and it would allow, the retailer or the person that has the pinball machine on site to give it, in essence, like a different look and still try to get some coins, hey, this person's playing this table, but now it's got more of an aquatic theme. Like I was saying before, like Sheriff versus Atlantis, same sort of table, but it's got like a different skin. Amazon Hunt was the name of tables that came out. There's an Amazon Hunt 2, there's an Amazon Hunt 3. I think those were in essence reskins. One that I find particularly hilarious, actually, was a table in 1985 called Rock, meaning rock and roll. And it's got this interesting little like loop-to-loop in the middle, and I don't think it had a lot of rock music being played, maybe just some other circuit board stuff that kind of had a harder edge to it. The next year, they came out with one with, I think, some different sounds, and it gave it a new back glass, and they called it Rock Encore. I advise anybody to look at Rock Encore because, to me, any back glass with actual pictures should not be. They just look weird.
Photos, you mean?
Yeah,
okay.
The photos, right. Anything that with photography in there, at best, they're barely passable. But at worst, they're just downright hilarious or cringe-inducing to the extreme. And I think Rock Encore sort of is one of those. But Gottlieb started doing that, I think, around 1986, 87. Again, they might be called translights, which is just like a printing process on how the light comes in. But anything with photographs on there, they're bad. I think there's a game called Raven. I don't think the game itself plays poorly, but it's always downvoted as one of the worst machines. And I guarantee the reason is because of the photograph. And it's not necessarily even bad. It's just really dated and just kind of hilarious, like a real misstep on their part. They had a lot of those at the time. I think Data East had some of those photograph back glasses as well. And honestly, I can't think of one right now where it's like, yeah, that's a photo instead of a drawing, and I'm really glad it's a photo. I can't think of a single one. So I think originals, though, going back to actual versus originals, those are ones that the community created. Diablo Pinball is one. Tom and Jerry is one. I've actually got, several dozen originals. Sometimes they have pup packs, sometimes not. And they might take just a theme that they like. I think, of a certain movie. Well, that pinball table didn't exist, but someone's just kind of recreating it. Someone is a fan of a musical act, like they're a fan of a particular rock group. It doesn't have to be a rock group. It could be like, Insane Clown Posse or Indochine or Johnny Halliday. I mean, it's these European legacy acts, and someone wanted to make a pinball machine out of it. But what's funny about it is they usually use the exact same playfield. So I collected these music machines, and they had the exact same playfield, and I got rid of them, well, for two reasons. One is the same playfield, and the other one is, well, you know what? Those music files that you're getting, you notice how you're not getting them from the legitimate file sharing sites about how you have to go somewhere else? That's because you're getting the music for free that you should be paying for. And I couldn't feel good about that. Now, if I happen to own the CD anyway, and if it's one that I purchased, then maybe that's not so bad. But just the music acts, I just didn't care too much for. Now, keep in mind, there are some actual tables with music, AC/DC. If you find a video where someone's showing off their cabinet, I'd say there's about a 30% chance that they're showing off the AC/DC table. And not just because it's high up on the alphabet list. It just looks cool. It's a great playing table. I think it's done by Steve Ritchie, was one of the all-time great pinball designers. And hey, it's AC/DC. It rocks. But you know, you were asking me about video pinball before, meaning the Atari 2600 version. Yeah, and I can't play that on there. But I do have Midnight Magic, which was like a game in 1986 or 1988 that came on the Atari 2600. Someone recreated that here. So there are games that have never existed actually, but they existed in a video game land, for one better term. The Space Cadet ring a bell?
Yeah.
Okay. See, everybody knows Space Cadet, right?
Yeah.
At least anybody of our generation, because you played it on the computer. Well, it was Microsoft didn't create that. They kind of rented it out from this other company that produced a game called Full Tilt Pinball, and they had 3 tables on there. And Microsoft said, "Can we run this one Space Cadet as a demo?" If you really think about it, it's probably the most popular pinball machine ever. You just didn't play it as an actual machine. Well, if you have a virtual pinball table, you can get about as close as you possibly can with it. So, yeah, I've got Space Cadet. In fact, I think you're seeing it right around this. I think you might have just seen it pass. I do have Space Cadet here, and it plays great. At the time of this, I think someone was actually going to try to recreate it in actuality, and I'm not sure it will work, because I think you're going to have a really high up ramp to get to that engine thing that's in the lower left. I'm not sure if that would even work, but hey, I applaud them for trying.
Are you ever done with a system like this?
Nope, you are never done. I don't know if you're ever done with an individual table. There's always a chance that some other member of the community recreated it a little bit better, and you're going to want that one. As far as my entire system goes, like the VPX programs that run, those are constantly being updated. So you have to look for updates, and there's a lot of maintenance, really. It's just you do it with clicks for the most part. You know, you're just moving the mouse around, or the touchpad, or what have you. But I mean, you hear that about actual pinball, about things just break and you got to get it serviced. It's just here, you've actually got a chance of being able to do it yourself. I don't know many people that can fix their own pinball table, and if they are, they can go into their own business fixing other people's pinball tables. But there's a B2S server program that gets updated. There's the FlexDMD, there's Freezy, there's VPinMain. I mean, there's always different names, and I've got it saved. You know, this computer that I have, I mean, I've got a browser here. It's connected to the internet. I go to these sites, and I know where to go to update the programs and to watch to see when they need to be updated. And if you don't do it after a while, suddenly you'll get a new table that just won't work on your machine. And a bunch of people ask why, and they'll say, well, do you have this version of this? And if you don't, then you got to update it. But honestly, it's not hard. You just download it and you swap it out. Almost every one of them is like that, where you just swap out a file. And again, all these files are free, and they're all meant to work with each other. So you're never really done. You'll never feel done. That doesn't mean that you have to constantly update and maintain. Because if you think about it, there are, you know, I mean, look at those other AtGames and Arcade 1-Up and those things. Those are done, I believe, in a sense. I don't think you have to go up and re-download stuff. But that doesn't mean they'll always improve. In fact, it won't. In fact, maybe sometimes they force firmware on you, or, you know, updated stuff, and you do have to do it. But don't feel like you have to update it every day or every week or anything. A funny thing is, though, if you're a DIY type, you might just want to do it anyway. And so many people in the community will tell you they just try to improve their machine more than they actually play it. I personally want to make sure that I am still playing my table, that I'm enjoying the individual original tables that were made, because if not, then it can just feel like work. It's not like I can go around and sell this machine. I can't sell this machine. In fact, I even got offered one, and I'm not going to tell them yes. I suppose I could sell them everything except the hard drive, but I can't make a profit on the files that were shared to me for free. That's not what I made. I can't do that. Only the manufacturers can make the money on it. So there's really no way to make money on that. But you can, the wood, you can make money on it if you want to create something like that. Philip Ellis out of Cleveland Software Design, made money off of me when I purchased those solenoids and the DOF kit from him, and that's all on the up and up. There's nothing wrong with that. That should be allowed. But no, you'll never feel done. And what's funny about it is you might come across a table that you thought was correct, and it's not. There was a game, and again, this is like early 80s when they were trying to compete with video games. There was a couple of Pac-Man themed pinball machines that came out. One was called Baby Pac-Man, which actually had Pac-Man on the back glass while you played pinball below on the play field. 10,000 of those came out somehow. About 7,000 of Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man came out. They both came out the same year, and they were the top 2 pinball machines produced that year. And Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man, which we really learned to like later on, but there's this little 5x5 grid where these lights, you're supposed to be you and someone's the ghost, and you got to fill in the entire 5x5 grid. And I just couldn't figure out why it made no sense to me. And I even asked the community, and no one could explain to me, where's the red ghost? Everything is yellow. And just from trial and error, I realized that I needed to change the brightness of the table and make it lower so that I could actually see the difference between my character, the Pac-Man, and the other character, the Ghost. Only then could I actually fully appreciate the machine. But man, I was asking the community, I was looking in the script, I was tinkering with the individual lights, trying to make some brighter, and I did do that a little bit. But that's an example of something where I thought I was done years ago, and I wasn't. Maybe next week I'll come upon another table that I'll really get in-depth playing, and I'll realize something's amiss, and I'm going to have to figure that out. So it is, God, I hate to say it, it really does feel like a lifelong hobby. I don't know how long this computer is going to last, but I'm going to enjoy it as much as I possibly can.
So in doing a project like this, you gain an appreciation not just for virtual pinball, but pinball, correct?
Yeah. Oh, you're right about that. And not just because you want to find out what tables to have on there. Looking at the artwork, you get a feel for what American culture was like at the time. And sometimes it was a little behind the times, Remember that Centigrade 37 table?
Yeah.
It looks like it's like a late 60s table. It came out in 1977. So yeah, Gottlieb was a little behind the times at that point, but I guess that's what they thought would sell. Well, how about this? In 1951, and it doesn't surprise me that the VPX community doesn't have it, there was a table that was supposedly a pretty good table called Minstrel Man. That was produced in 1951. That would not be produced today. You're not going to see virtual pinball community produce it either, and I can't say I blame them on that. But, doing research through the Internet Pinball Database, actually there's a YouTube a content creator named Bralex. I don't know if that's pronounced Bralex, but he's got a 4-part history of pinball that's definitely worth watching. He's got humor in it. He did a really good job, and it's about 2 hours in all, but you really get a feel for the entire history of, going from Bagatelle all the way up to the modern era. It's definitely a good watch. Bank Shot was the name of a pinball table that came out in 1976. Now, that's one where it was an add-a-ball version of Sure Shot, which was a replay version. Add-a-ball existed for places like New York where, okay, you're not allowed to have replay versions here, anybody that could win a free game, but you can kind of skirt around it if you can just win extra balls on it. But still, you paid once and you got one game. So Bank Shot was out there. And in 1976, a man named Roger Sharp appeared with a group in front of the New York City Council to show that it's not that seedy, gambling, organized crime thing that they think pinball is. It's not just out there to make money and take advantage of people. It's not just a game of chance. It really is a game of skill. You can make the case that it's been a game of skill since Humpty Dumpty in 1947 introduced flippers. You have to know what you're doing to do better at this. It's not just like a coin flip. It's not something you would really gamble on. And so he played Bank Shot. I think he was going to play El Dorado, but the council switched it up on him. They were worried he was too experienced on one, so they said, play Bank Shot. And he played it really well. He intentionally let the ball drop. He told him he would, and he said, okay, there's 5 in-lanes on the top. I'm going to take this plunger, and I'm going to send it through the middle one. That B.R. Alex thing, he'll tell you that Roger Sharp said it was chance, but he pulled it off. And they stopped it right there and said, okay, we can make this legal again. The man that saved pinball. I think there's a book. In fact, he is an author, Roger Sharp is, and there's a movie out there that you could find out there that's worth a watch. The historic significance of Bank Shot. That was something I didn't realize at first, but just through experience, I realized, okay, that's what I want to have in my collection. And the tables I have here, I don't know if the word curated is correct, but every table I have on here, there's a reason I have it on here. And the ones I don't have, it's because they don't really belong. So it's a collection. It's been with me over the years, and it's something that it either continues to grow or shrink, but it's something that's never really going to feel done.
In seeing the tables go by,
Yep.
There's a new appreciation for the artwork.
Yeah, that's true. They hire, it was just guys from art design houses. They usually use the same 2 or 3 guys early on, and then they sort of expanded that, the Python Angelos of the world and whatnot. But guys like Art Stenholm and George Melenton, and there's other names I'm forgetting. And they had their distinctive look, And when I look at these tables, and I can talk about how the playfield is the same, but the artwork is part of your enjoyment, It's not just the theme, it's just how pretty it is. And yeah, as you watch these, you get a better feeling from them. And, if you like one more than the other. If it's bad art, you're not going to like the table. And if it's good art, you're going to give it another chance. So this front end allows a ratings system, as you know. Mm-hmm. And as we go through these tables, we keep that in mind, the artwork and, how it fits in the time. And, if you think about it, we've rated like 600 of these tables.
Yeah.
Over the years, and we'll do them actually the way we organize them now, you like that better?
Yeah.
Like how we set them, instead of just doing a random one or doing it alphabetically, we'll look at all the tables from 1972. Something like that, where you get a better feeling from them and you get you understand which ones are better than others.
You can compare what was hot that year and what one table could do, and maybe another table didn't measure up.
Yeah, and what was ahead of the curve. You think about Ernie Kovacs, who, if you're in the right mindset, you can really appreciate what he did for comedy in the medium of television. If you were to show a kid Ernie Kovacs, they wouldn't appreciate him at all. If you were to show someone that didn't really care about history, they wouldn't appreciate him at all. But if you put him within the context of what was going on at that time, you'll find it actually funnier, than anybody else would, because it's like, wow, for its time, this was amazing. You can say that about some of the tables that we have here. And if you play them all within a certain year, then you get a better feeling for them. But if you compare, like Ernie Kovacs to like a Seinfeld or something like that, you just play Twilight Zone, it's going to be hard to appreciate Humpty Dumpty or El Dorado or just some other tables that have historical significance and are also really enjoyable. And I mean, I've got hundreds of them here. Not all of these tables are good. It's not like I'm just keeping the good tables. I'm keeping for the most part, I keep ones that were produced by the big manufacturers and have a distinctive play field. Not just an add-a-ball version or a two-player version. And the better originals I see, and some really good reskins. Conversion kits, not necessarily, And then just a couple of our ones that hold a particular interest to me. That's what I have here. And it's fun to go through the ratings. And this Pinball Y and you don't see it here, but it lets me give it like a 0 stars or a half a star or 1 star and go all the way up to 5 stars. So you have to kind of break it up in that way. And we actually kind of look at the artwork and decide if it's good and if maybe they took too many chances and maybe it doesn't belong, right?
Well, frankly, they were the target audience for a lot of pinball was young men.
Yeah,
and while there are young women and people of other ages who would play pinball, they were often going for that young man attract mode.
Oh yeah, and they certainly got it. What's funny is there are 3 tables that I know by major manufacturers made by with the theme of Playboy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Only one of them I would call out of bounds, I think. Like the most popular one came out in 1978, and apart from showing like a girl in a bikini, I don't think there's anything bad about it. I think my 6-year-old seeing that table, I wouldn't worry too much about it. The other ones, though, there's one from Data East. Yeah, that's particularly cringy, and it definitely would have hurt the rating that we would have given it.
Do you still hope for certain tables to be available?
I mentioned Baffle Ball, right? Like, I really hope someone creates that. Yeah, not everything that I'd like to see is out there. I think it's your Genko or Genko. Harry Williams, who created Williams Pinball, he had a really interesting table in the early 30s called Mercury, which was ahead of its time. That one's not out there. I mentioned Future Pinball before. One of the big names is a man named Terry Red, who's creating stuff in Future Pinball. One of the things that FP can do that VPX cannot is it can actually show several different play fields within the same table. It can switch it around. And for years, he has been a huge fan of the video game series Silent Hill. He's been teasing for years a Silent Hill table. Obviously, it's just not up to the standards that he has set for himself. But he's been working on that for a very, very long time, and I really look forward to that coming out when it comes out. Actually, the first solid-state table is an ugly table. It was by Mirko, and it's called Spirit of 76. It's not out there. It's ugly. It's bad. But for historical significance, I would still love to have it as part of it, and I'm hoping someone creates it. I've actually got a couple of others in mind. I think there was one that was a small pinball machine with an upside-down playfield, and you play it off a mirror, and it's called Varcon. Could that be created? Sure, but it hasn't. Ben Heck, who is an influencer, he made a Bill Paxton pinball. Why would you make Bill Paxton pinball? I think it was because Bill Paxton was a big name in movies in the mid-90s when they were doing so many licensed themes with DMDs. So his face is on a lot of pinball machines, and Ben Heck made a Bill Paxton pinball, but I can't play the equivalent of it, and maybe someday I'll be able to. Cactus Canyon is a favorite of mine, but they rushed it out in 1998 or so, and so the ROM wasn't complete. There is a more complete ROM out there. You need to get P-Rock to work. I haven't been able to figure that out yet. And the Pinball 2000 tables. You remember Pinball 2000?
Yeah.
So what was it? Revenge from Mars and Star Wars Episode 1.
Yeah.
And as B.R. Alex said, it's sad that Pinball 2000 didn't even make it. They didn't even make it to the year 2000. Williams or WMS closed the pinball division in mid to late 99 because they weren't making enough money on pinball and they can just make money on slot machines. And it's just really, really sad. That's why it's great that a guy like Gary Stern wanted to keep it alive. But yeah, I'd like to see some of those Pinball 2000 tables, and that's going to be hard for VPX to do, but hopefully at some point I'll be able to, play one of those on this cabinet here.
How could someone contribute to the virtual pinball community?
Well, they could create. I guess we're creating with this video. I'm just trying to show more awareness out there. And again, I'm going to list on the, I'll have a list of other people that have created stuff on YouTube that's worth it for anybody that wants to get involved. But if you were actually to create a table, like an original, or one that's out there, I've got this weird back glass that kind of wings out. The game Safecracker, that's a Pat Lawler table. I love Pat's stuff. I think it's from 1996. No one's made the back glass with the wings. Could I do that? I think so. I just got to work at it. There's a Space Invaders table from either 79 or 80, and they've got artwork that is a ripoff of H.R. Geiger. Why don't we reskin that one with actual H.R. Geiger artwork? I'd love to see that. Maybe I'll be the one to make that. Maybe I'll take the Pokemon table, and I don't mean the brand new one. I have Pokemon tables out here. It's the same theme, but a completely different table than the current Stern one. And it's got these individual battles with Pokemon characters. Maybe I'll retheme that to some other competition. Or maybe I'll make a complete original that involves like hitting different areas and changing like the color of your ball and trying to match colors. That's one idea I have. I'm not sure VPX can do it, but if it can, I would love to do that. I would love to contribute that way. And hopefully this community can continue to thrive. And I think it will, as long as people don't start making money off of something that they can't sell.
Well, thank you for explaining all this today, and thank you for watching our video.
Yes, thank you very much. So how about now? Now can we play?
Let's play.